Okay, it's gone 7 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee on Thursday, the 18th of June 2020 at 7 p.m. I'm Councillor Weatherlake, Chair of the Audit and Governance Committee, and the Vice Chair of this committee is Councillor Hicks. I'd like to extend a particular welcome to Councillor Sadiq, who has recently joined the committee. This meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. Following the meeting, the stream will remain on YouTube and will also be available to view on the Council's website. I'll mention a few key points here that will help us to have a successful meeting. The governance section of the agenda will be chaired by myself, and the audit section will be chaired by Vice Chair Councillor Hicks. Should the member chairing the item lose connection at any point, the other will take over the chairing of the meeting. When you're not speaking, please turn your microphone off, as this saves bandwidth. On the live stream, you will appear on the screen when your microphone is up sound, so this will save the stream cutting to different members suddenly. I shall allow plenty of time for members to speak on items and shall make this very clear as we move through the agenda. Therefore, please only speak when I call on you to do so. When you speak, please turn your camera on if you're happy to do so. And when you speak for the first time, please state your name clearly before you begin. Councillors should introduce themselves with their title and name. Officers should state their name and their title. You don't need to do this every time you speak, but it will help if you do it the first time. If you want to raise a point during the meeting, please use the chat box in the top right of the screen where you can type question or point of order. For example, if you wish to ask an officer a question about their report, I shall ask those who wish to contribute to simply type question and will then invite those members to speak one by one. I will monitor the chat box as the meeting progresses. If you wish to make a point of order or personal explanation, please do so in the same way, and I shall endeavour to move to you once the person currently speaking is finished. Finally, on some votes, I may ask members to record their vote in the chat box to save going through a roll call. I'll make this clear when we come to those votes. As we begin this meeting, I shall ask all members to state that they are present as the clerk moves through an alphabetical roll call of members and substitutes. If you're present in the meeting but have your camera switched off, please state this. Cassie, could you start the roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, as I read your name, please turn on your microphone and camera and state if you are present. After you have spoken, please switch your microphone and camera to off. Councillor Richard Clifton.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor David Hicks.
Present.
Councillor Nick Matty.
Here.
Councillor James McDermott Hill.
Here and present.
Councillor Ali Mir Hashim.
Clear and present. Hello.
Councillor Parananda.
Yes, present.
Councillor Nali Patel.
Present, please.
Councillor Mohammed Sadiq.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Colin Steers.
Yes, I'm here.
I will now read the names of the independent persons. Neil Aston. I don't think your microphone's on, Neil. We still can't hear you.
Apologies, Chair. Cassie, can I suggest we carry on with the roll call and come back to me in a moment?
Of course. And David Parrott.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Thank you. I'll now pass to the Chair.
Thank you. Now we'll move to apologies for absence. Cassie, have you received any apologies?
I can confirm I haven't received any apologies.
Thank you. Nor have I. Do we have any other apologies for absence or substitute members? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on now to the declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest? Okay, no declarations. Thank you. So we'll now move to item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. Members, can we approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 23rd of January 2020? I'll allow time for members to speak if they wish to express dissent on the minutes. Members, if you're happy to accept these minutes, please comment in the chat box. Okay, thank you very much. I'll take the minutes as approved, and I will sign the minutes outside the meeting after the social distancing restrictions have been lifted. We now move to item 5, operation of the Code of Conduct, and I'll ask the relevant officer to present this item.
Sorry about that, Chair. I was thinking people can hear me.
Yes, okay.
The report is brief. I have to say that I was in post for about 6 weeks before the lockdown happened, so my involvement face-to-face with members obviously has been very limited. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Stephen Gerrard. I'm the Interim Monitoring Officer, and I've been at Sutton now, both in person and virtually, since about the beginning of February. The report is there. I have to say that my time at Sutton in terms of member conduct has been pleasantly quiet, actually, which is no bad thing. You can see the 3 items that have currently before me. They're under consideration. In the light of the lockdown, it's obviously been difficult to progress some of these matters, and open questions.
So yes, do members have any questions for the officers? Please indicate in the chat box if you do, and I will move through them one by one. Councillor Mahasham.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stephen, for the short but sweet brief on this. In terms of the document on page 8, I was just looking at the points that the monitoring officer will consider in determining whether a complaint requires investigation. Point 4, just a quick question. It says the complainant is on the basis that the complainant has provided sufficient information, for referral for investigation or any other action. Now, I mean, I wanted to know what your thoughts were on, and what the line was on this idea of sufficient information. I mean, I appreciate it might be on an ad hoc basis, but what were your thoughts on that, and where do you see that going? How do you see it working in terms of the monitoring officer and complaints that are brought up about councillors?
In practice, it isn't just up to me, because I have to consult with the independent person to establish whether or not there is essentially a prima facie case. And sufficient information, to my mind, would be, is there enough information to put it before members where there is a reasonable prospect of the members making a finding of misconduct? If a matter is frivolous, or there isn't the evidence there, I wouldn't want to put the member through the difficulty of going before the standards subcommittee, nor would I wish the expense of that. But I would share that thought first of all with the independent person, and it would be a mutual agreement between myself and the independent person that there wasn't sufficient information to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Mahasham, did you have a follow-up question?
I do, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Stephen, for that. And so in which case then, and I take what you said, at 0.5.1, it states that in addition, so the monitoring officer must consult the independent person when reaching a decision to investigate, and that goes by exactly what you just said. It says a legal advice is taken when necessary to inform the decisions. Now, I guess where I'm going with that is, surely legal advice should be taken in every case. So whenever there's been a claim issued, the guidance to which you run by must be taken in conjunction with that of the law. And I know you will say it is in the Localism Act, but I mean the by the actual, by the in-house legal team at LBS? Thank you.
I suspect that was probably written for the previous monitoring officer, who was not a lawyer. I'm a solicitor. I've been a solicitor in local government for 40 years. So I suspect that I would probably have a reasonable understanding, I would trust, of the legal position. I think that in the past, Jess, who was the previous monitoring officer, for example, was not a lawyer, so that was probably put in there explicitly just to make sure that point was covered off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Councillor Hicks, I believe you have a question.
When I can conquer the technology. Paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3 talk about public perception of slow response from councillors. Have you considered putting out guidance to all councillors on the best way of dealing with these issues, so we get a consistent approach, or are you going to leave it to the groups to sort out their own members?
I think it probably is ultimately up to individual members, but I think it's probably a good idea that we, perhaps through the group liaison, think about setting some expectation. But of course, it is up to individual members. There are members who might choose to reply to no correspondence, and that's perfectly proper. It might be unusual, but there's no obligation on a member to reply to any constituent or to any correspondence.
Okay. I come back again to a question I asked once before, which was, we talked about some form of case management system for councillors. Are we any nearer to getting that, or is it still a wish that isn't achievable?
The answer is, I'm not sure, but I will get back to you on that one, sir.
Okay, thanks. Sir.
I will, with your permission, copy the rest of the members of the committee as well on that point. I have to say that's not something I've picked up before, but I will come back to you on that and find out where we are on that one.
It has been buzzing around now for about 18 months, and it was raised some time ago. Yeah, and we were offered the prospect of getting it.
Right. I will make inquiries.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matty.
I've sort of would like to make a complaint about a number of things, but when it's going to be reviewed by all members and the majority of them are Liberal Democrats, it's very unlikely, as probably Mr. Jarvis has said, that they would find against any of their fellow Liberal Democrats. I mean, if I take a couple of general points, I pointed out that it was wrong for Liberal Democrats to go around the New Mill Quarter telling people that their heating bills were fine and that the heating came from green energy, when in fact it didn't. It was being Freedom of Information request said it was coming from British Gas. So, you know, we're missing.
Matty, if you could confine yourself to discussing the general trends as mentioned.
Well,
I appreciate you have particular examples.
Well, that's one example. So obviously, the Liberal Democrats would think there was nothing wrong with that. So that means that we haven't got an effective way of doing anything. Then we have I made a complaint about the chief executive getting in contact with Morrison's behind the back local councils.
Councillor Matty, please don't refer to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, we are meant to be discussing things. We can't just.
Point of order, Chair. This is not part of the meeting.
Well, if you let me speak, the point is it's all about how members behave and what they do, and also officers. And this sort of, it's unacceptable when the monitoring officer decides that on the balance there is more Liberal Democrats than anybody else, that there will be the verdict will be in favour of.
Excuse me, Chair.
Where's your evidence for that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair. I think you do need to close this down because it's not
Yes.
appropriate.
Yes. Could the monitoring officer respond to the general point, please?
What?
About political
I'm
impartiality.
not sure what the general point is, but the reality is that the code of conduct, I do not regulate the conduct of members. I've made this point to a number of members. Members regulate each other, and essentially members regulate themselves. They regulate themselves through groups, and they regulate themselves through peer pressure. And it isn't for the monitoring officer to discipline or to sanction individual members. It's up to members to hold themselves to account. I would also, I think, reference that the previous code of conduct, going back before 2011, and the Standards Board for England, was brought into disrepute and was abolished by the then Secretary of State, Mr. Pickles, on the basis that members had brought the process into disrepute by using it to attack each other. And the code of conduct is not there for members to use as a political tool, one against another. It really, it should only be used in those circumstances, in the most egregious circumstances. It is there to ensure public trust and confidence in the body politic. And if members actually use the code of conduct, one against the other, it will bring it into disrepute very quickly, and inevitably it politicizes the code of conduct, and that is wrong.
Could I just make the point that what I'm saying is that as far as the law is concerned, any claims for any services or products must be true and factual. And therefore, if you've got political leaflets which are not true and you give them out to people to tell them that the service that they're getting does represent good value for money, then this is wrong. And the council needs a mechanism to tell members that they cannot endorse businesses. The businesses might be run by Sutton Council, but the point is that
Point of order, Chair, this is not part of this meeting.
Well, it may not be to you because obviously you're paid, to be a Liberal Democrat. But
Councillor Massey, as I've said before, this is not the appropriate place to raise political points. So I'll have to bring.
I'm not making a political point. All I'm saying is that if we want members to be treated with respect by the public, politicians should not endorse businesses. And as you probably know, there's about 250 people are making a complaint about their heating bills.
All right, thank you, Councillor Massey. Okay. Does Mr. Gerard, do you have any further comment on this?
I have no further comments, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nanda, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the point 4.3. It's talking about the members considering putting automatic responses on the email, which something I have brought up last committee meeting as well in October, whether we should have a generic some sort of link or something from the council, how these complaints or how the things will be recorded and how many days it will take to respond and all of the things. Normally we do get, when we report it to the members inquiry, we get a reply. It will take 7 to 14 days and we have allocated to this office or something. Whether shall we or can we able to have some sort of generic frame so where we can attach in our email to the residents? Thank you.
I think this was dealing with something a little different. I think what you're referring to, sir, if I understand you correctly, is where you have referred something to an officer for a response, you would like to know the time for the officer to respond to you. Is that correct?
I'm aware of the officer's response because we do get it within 7 days. What I'm asking is to send some sort of to the residents how the process works, so then they know it takes about 2 weeks or something, because nowadays they expect everything to be happen within 48 hours.
it's my understanding that if you do refer a complaint or an issue to officers, then there will be an email sent to the individual setting out how long the response will be. I think that already happens, but I will confirm that.
Thank you. Councillor Mahasham, you wanted to briefly come in on this?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And just my question would be to Councillor Nanda. I appreciate what he's saying, and so you might put a members' inquiry in, and you might have to wait, for example, 10 days or 2 weeks, or however long it might be, until it says, where it says on the members' inquiry email, your response will be processed. But my only question would be, though, there's nothing stopping incumbent councillors writing to residents to say, look, essentially a holding email saying, look, I've sent your inquiry onto the council, I'm waiting for an answer. Once I hear back, I'll let you know. And if it might get delayed or something, then you might be able to further just relay that information on. I think I remember we discussed this in the previous meeting, and I think what Councillor Nanda, and I think maybe Councillor Hicks as well, I think the three of us are discussing this. It's an interesting point. It's an interesting idea, the idea of having a set time at which we have to respond by. I think some of the issues that immediately come to my mind are the different types of casework that we get. So there might be some casework that might be more complex. There might be different work. The speed in which officers might work within departments might be contingent upon their workload, so it might be different as well. And I feel like I think it's incumbent on councils to be giving that steer to residents.
Thank you, Councillor.
When they're going to be able to complete pieces of work. Sorry, I'm rabbiting on. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nanda, did you want to reply to that?
I think he touched on similar view I had. I think at present how system works, when we report to the members' inquiry and we get the reply, then we respond to the residents and say we have reported and the time frame will take up to 20th of June. This is what I've been told by the officials and all the things. And we will get back to you in due courses. What I'm saying is, automatically, if there's a process, they can report to the resident as well, to the councillor as well, because at present the members' inquiry only reply to us, not to the residents.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clifton, I think you had a point you wanted to raise.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Could I really had two things I just wanted to raise. The first was, can I just say as a sort of general comment on this paper, that we get this paper at each meeting with a list of complaints under the Code of Conduct. And I've always sort of taken the view that if there were hundreds of complaints, you'd say, well, there's something very seriously wrong about behaviour. And if there were no complaints at all, you say, well, then there's perhaps something wrong with the Code of Conduct, it's not being publicised anyway at all. So we've got 3 complaints, but since the 31st of October last year. That strikes me as not very many. And I think in paragraph, it would suggest to me that there is really some great problem. And in paragraph 4.2 of the paper, I think a gallant attempt is made to try and draw some general conclusions from these three complaints, which I don't think one actually can do. The other comment I just wanted to make was when reading this, I suddenly thought to myself, gosh, I remember in the past we did have a very interesting discussion under this agenda item about a particular aspect of the planning protocol, which is a sort of adjunct to the code of practice. And I thought, well, what happened to that? And when I checked the minutes, I found it was in actually January 2019. And I contacted the chair of the planning committee and I said, do you know what happened to that issue? And he said, no, I never heard anything. And there was a very interesting discussion, and the then monitoring officer, Jessica Crow, said she would take it away and she would come back with some further proposals. And clearly she never did that. And so Stephen is left to sort of pick this up. But I would like to say, it's partly because I'm a previous chair of planning committee, and the issue concerned was a very active issue when I was chair. And in fact, there was a peer review of planning committee, which led to the proposal that, well, it was said by the peer review that Sutton was out of step with other councils in what we were doing. And there was the peer review actually proposed this code of this planning protocol as a way of dealing with this particular problem. And I was dismayed to discover that it was still a problem. So I'd just like to give notice that I think that this matter should, I was dismayed to realise that it's been since January 2019, it still hasn't been dealt with. I think it should be dealt with. And I'd like to give Stephen Gerrard the notice that since I do have strong views on it, and the views I expressed at the committee are now gone because Jessica didn't pick up the issue. I'd like to just drop you an email with my thoughts on this subject. I didn't suggest that, Chair, that we reopen that particular discussion again in terms of the substance, but I'd just like to point out there's a bit of.
I think Mr. Gerrard would like to respond on that.
Yeah.
Well, just to say, it has recently come back. It's come onto my radar. I think Matthew, the committee clerk, has brought it to my attention, and I understand that actually there has been some work going on quietly in the background. I think because of the lockdown and everything else, it's gone on the back boiler because a lot of those people have clearly been distracted doing other things. But we will resurrect it, I think, and try and bring it back to the next meeting and give you a progress report as to where we are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Following on from a point that Councillor Clifton raised in 4.5, it says that the committee may wish to reduce the frequency of these reports to biannual rather than quarterly. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Okay, I would be inclined to keep the system as it is, although there are not many of them. I think it's good that we are kept in touch with such issues as do arise, and we don't need to spend over much time on it. But I think it's good that this does come quarterly. Does it have any strongly differing views on that? Okay, good. Right, I'd like to draw this item to a close now. So we will move to a vote on the officer recommendations. Which
sorry, Chair. Sorry. Just I had a point. I just wanted to.
Yes, Councillor, briefly, please.
Just very quickly on this, was it possible to maybe add in the point raised by Councillor Hicks about the case management system? I'm quite interested to see how that might work. Well, the case management system that was
yes.
introduced, the point that was raised by Councillor Hicks. Will that be coming? That'll be coming back next meeting. Is that correct?
It can do. Yeah, I'm happy to give that.
Okay.
But I will write to all the members in the meantime anyway and let you know what the current position is, because I can't say I'm currently familiar with it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Can I just come in and say something?
I do want to draw this item to close. If you can be very quick, please.
There's two important points about interacting with residents. One of the things now is that I didn't ask for this, but my face now appears when I try and on my phone and an email, which I didn't ask. And what this did is it made my phone unstable, so I've had to take it off. Now, I don't think that members, if the IT department want to play around and superimpose images, I think they should ask the members if that's okay, because it's really annoying. It meant that my search engine just kept crashing all the time. I got involved in a lot of work, had to get the whole thing off, reboot the whole system, and
I understand the issue. What was your
so could we put it so that we can ask members if they want to have this feature or not, and it shouldn't be imposed on them. The second point, the problem as well, is that I think Councillor Clifton knows all about this as well, is that sometimes there'll be a complaint about conduct within the council, and I took a 500 signature complaint to the council, and the one Councillor Clifton, as it happened, sat on the committee and he refused.
Again, I have to remind you, please don't
what I'm saying is you can't have, if members of the public want to find out what's going on in the council, you cannot have friends of the complainant deciding not to investigate the matter, because in Councillor Clifton's
Okay,
case,
again, please do not refer to individual members.
what I'm saying is that we need to have a system whereby if a petition comes into the council about, for instance, behaviour or relationship with something to do with a specific councillor, we need to make sure that the people who decide whether any action is going to be done with the petition should not be best friends with the person that is up here. So this is a very important point, yeah?
So the first in the IT question, secondly, the general principle of partiality. Okay, Mr. Gerard.
Yeah. I'm not sure either of those are actually quite pertinent to the report, but on the IT issue, I'm sure that Matthew Stickley has taken the point and will take it up as appropriate. In terms of the petition, it's not something I'm aware of, and I'm not sure that it's actually relevant. If Councillor Matthew wants to raise it offline with me, I'm happy to.
I will.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we will move to a vote on the officer recommendations now, which are 2.1 to note and comment on the action taken by the monitoring officer in dealing with complaints, and 2.2 to make any further recommendations relevant to the committee's role and function in promoting high standards of ethical conduct by members. So members, can we agree to those recommendations, and please advise me through the chat function if anyone wants to dispute that. Councillor Hicks, you had a quick, short point you wanted to make?
Yes, it'd be useful to know some statistics on how many complaints have progressed from a simple complaint to being actioned or just being rejected at the first stage, and what the reasons were for rejection.
Okay.
Yes. Please.
Yeah. I think what I can do is I think there is a central database of these kept, and clearly most of these would have happened before I took up posts. So I think if perhaps we go back 12 to 18 months, and I'll try and do a consolidated picture for the next meeting, that might be helpful. So rather than just a snapshot in time, we can do perhaps the picture over the last 18 months to give members a look at the trends and the totality of what's happening.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think that would be interesting to see those statistics.
Yeah, I'd be interested as well, I think, yes.
Okay, thank you. No indications of dissent, so we'll consider that report received and move on to item 6, Code of Corporate Governance. So could the officer present this one, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, right. It's Margaret Cullerton, Head of Internal Audit. This paper is I'm presenting as the Code of Corporate Governance that we developed as part of our annual governance review that we do every year. We set out this year a code in line with the CITFA guidance in delivering good governance in local government, so which sets out how the council meets each of the 7 principles, and it's something that we can then measure against each year to say how we're meeting each of
McDermott Hill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just have a very quick question, and I hope it's not a question that's too obvious. In compiling this year's report, did you find any significant changes that you were having to sort of update in compiling this year's report compared to last year? It can take into account any of the key factors that were made in compiling this year's report.
Thank you. This is the first year I've pulled together a code. So the actual annual government statement will come to the next committee, which will be the full review against the council's governance arrangements. So that's due to go to corporate management team at the end of the month for further discussion and agreement. So I'll be feeding back at that point. I suppose this paper is just sort of setting out more on the type of policies we have and boards that we have set up. Yeah, so as it's the first paper I've done on that, it's nothing to compare it on that, in that sense, but the annual government statement certainly will be when that comes. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yes. Well, thank you for that. That is useful. I think sort of my main question was, did you find any sort of particular areas that you thought, in terms of the working of the council, that you thought maybe needed updating to a significant degree in the past year? Talking about the previous sort of stuff that you were looking at, or did you find it sort of fairly straightforward?
No, it's quite straightforward. I think I've also done, which I'll be feeding into the annual government statement, I did a self-assessment with the directors and assistant directors. And I think that just the sort of things were coming out from that was just some of the policies needed maybe refreshing and updating. Nothing major came out of the self-assessment. So yeah, it's just sort of keeping things up to date. I've got a paper coming on the whistleblowing as well, and that needs refreshing and getting the policy onto the intranet and website. So things like that, it's just procedures and policies that needed updating.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clifton.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Can I just say, I mean, this is a very comprehensive paper, and one reads it and says, my goodness, there's an awful lot going on, isn't there? But I couldn't find any reference in it anywhere to the role of recognised trade unions. As a trade unionist, I'm very keen on the view that trade unions do have a role to play in corporate government. I found that there is a reference to the Council and Employees Joint Committee, chair, and to the Sutton Joint Health and Safety Committee, which really rarely meets these days, but is wrenched on Principle B. And these are, of course, committees with where councils meet with recognised representatives of recognised trade unions. So I think that one should recognise that trade unions do have a role to play. I mentioned earlier the peer review of planning committee, which I was involved in. I'm actually very keen on that, from that experience, on the view that peer reviews of what we do by outsiders who are experts in their field is actually something that's very useful. And when I quickly read through this, I thought I found a reference somewhere to the role of peer reviews, and now I'm looking for it, I can't find it. So perhaps there is a reference somewhere to the role of peer reviews. That's what I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Do we have a response to that?
Sorry, I can't actually particularly recall what. If I'll have a look through it and see if there's any reference to peer reviews. I can't recall what section that would be in at the moment, but there should be a reference somewhere. It's certainly referenced in the main AGS. So yeah, I need to let you know.
Councillor Clifton, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hicks, you have a question.
Hello, yes, it's on page 22, page 23. We talk about reviewing objectives and priorities and then monitoring delivery of services. Are we talking about the role of audit and governance there, or the role of the councillors, council departments in maintaining that function?
So I can't see which section you mean.
It's page 22,
Yeah.
last section, and the first section on page 23.
Principle D.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Because I think, oh yeah, this is actually talking about services that are reviewing their objectives and priorities, because then it links into appraisal objectives and service plans. So it's about services themselves that are reviewing those, and I suppose performance indicators and things like that would feed into that area.
Okay. It's just that on page 23, the effective arrangements to identify and deal with service delivery, it mentions complaints procedure, contract management, performance risk board. I'm not aware of what that is. Whistleblowing policy and mechanisms for reporting fraud. What about?
Oh, sorry, it should have the red board. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
But so that's fine. But then, what are the procedures that the council has in place to monitor delivery of its expectations, or what would you expect them to be?
Chair, can I come in?
Yes, please.
Richard Simpson, Strategic Director, Resources. I suppose there's a number of them that probably this doesn't capture in their entirety. I mean, most of our service committees get B&N, People Committee and Strategy and Resources Committee all get quarterly updates on performance against agreed indicators, which reflects the outcomes set out in the corporate plan. So I suppose that's the key area of member oversight for the delivery of performance. If that performance delivery becomes a risk to delivery, quite often Audit and Governance Committee would have a role in reviewing how that risk being managed and mitigated. On a kind of operational basis, departmental management teams of the council would receive more detailed reports on performance at a kind of team and directorate level. The corporate management team would receive performance reports on a monthly basis, and then you get down into individuals' performance and appraisals, which Margaret set out in the paper. So there probably is there's probably a number of mechanisms that this framework, it's quite bullet pointy, isn't it? I suppose this document, it can't necessarily tell you the full story. I think what Margaret was saying in her introduction was that the annual government statement that comes to the next committee is more of the review against this, about how we're doing. This is just setting out some of the ways these things are done, I suppose, as a framework.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Collison, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, that's fine. That's very clear.
Thank you. Councillor Massey.
Yeah, I mean these are fine ideals, and you know, they're there to be commended, but in practice, you know, it's not really happening. I mean, the council have spent, I don't know, £30,000 plus trying to hide information from me about their heat. Well, I mean, if we don't discuss it, where can we discuss? I mean, point is, we can't say, well, every time we bring up something that isn't working, we mustn't discuss it because it's political. It's not, it's money, it's taxpayers' money. Look at the way, the money that has now been squandered, because for a year, we've been, the council has been behind building a school in Sheen Way. Now we're against it.
I have to remind you that individual instances cannot be raised. The principles can be discussed.
Okay. Well, on the general point, there is too much secrecy. I'm afraid that the council is divided. It's a sort of them and us, where it's certain information is kept hidden from members, so that we can't make informed decisions. And because obviously we're considered to be, I mean, the original reason that I was told that I could not see the financial review was it was very complicated, and basically it was, and that is so patronising, you know, that I cannot look at, you know, I'm a councillor, you know, I've run a number of businesses, you know, and I cannot, but I'm unable to read a financial.
I think Mr. Gerard might be the appropriate officer to respond to this.
Well, the thing is that on the general point, we've got to move away from trying to keep things secret from other councillors, because the whole point about having a council and you're having 54 councillors is that councillors should be able to be part of the decision making process, and they can't be excluded because they might say, well, actually this is a really bad idea and it could end up costing the council.
Thank you, Councillor Matty. Mr. Gerard, do you want to come back on that?
Well, I'm not sure it would be helpful to do so, really. I think it's just worth noting that, in a sense, the ultimate arbiter of all this is the ballot box. You know, and the reality is you are a council that works on a political basis, and the appointments to committees are by law on a proportional basis. The appointments to outside bodies is on a proportional basis. It is just the way of the world. You are a political entity. You can't get away from that fact.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gerard. Councillor Mahasham, you had a question on the code.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, Principle D, the Code of Governance Principle D, on the second page of it, I'm not sure, on my thing it's page 27, I'm not sure what page that is for you, but where it says considers feedback from residents, service users and staff when making decisions about service improvements or significant changes to service, it says staff conversations. Now, I know this on plan in the resident survey, they're more kind of formal questions, more formal bits and ways of noting down information. In terms of staff conversations, that seems quite an informal way of gathering information. I was wondering whether there's anything formal there for staff at LBS.
Okay. Okay. Do any of the officers want to comment on that?
Can I come in, Chair?
Yes, please.
So yeah, there's some formal processes like the appraisal system, and there's monthly one-to-ones, annual appraisal, and half-year review where there's opportunities. Obviously, some of that's about how the member staff's performing, how they're developing in their role, but also to get feedback and ideas around improving the service from their perspective, and that they're formal mechanisms. But I think this is trying to capture those things can happen kind of on a day-to-day basis. We also do a staff survey. Normally every 2 years. We're about to start doing more kind of pulse surveys that can be done on a monthly basis to kind of test out a series of questions about how staff are feeling. We're launching one of those next week. So some of that will be about the last 3 months as well, and how staff are coping from working in quite a different way. We've got 89% of staff working from home on a day-to-day basis, so you know, nearly 1,000 staff working in quite a different way. So obviously there's been conversations during those 3 months, but there are some formal mechanisms and informal mechanisms for capturing that, and obviously a significant amount of staff are residents as well, so you've got kind of two hats on as a member of staff. If you live in Sutton as well, you'll be receiving the council services.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mahasham, did you have anything you want to say on that?
No, that's fine for me. Thank you.
Okay. Question from Councillor McDermott Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to as a general comment, I think, draw attention to, which is on page 18, where Principle B of the Code of Governance is. And I note that we've been talking a bit about sort of openness and transparency, and I think the first bullet point at the top of that sort of Principle B refers to the Constitution, and I think as councillors we are probably, well, I certainly find the sort of the Constitution and the Constitution framework a bit of a mystery in the council, and I think whatever comes out of this Code of Governance, I think if we as a sort of a body politique of the council are able to better engage with the Constitution, and I know that there has been some work being done on this within the council and getting outside figures to look at it and the rest of it. But I think if we can sort of hone in on making sure that our engagement as councillors with the Constitution can be improved, then I think that can only be a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Does one of the officers want to respond to that?
Yes, I'm sure that's correct. It's the first thing to say. I suppose just drawing attention to what this document's about. It's about the things that are in place within the council to help deliver those principles. So obviously the Constitution is one of the key documents to help ensure we've got arrangements in place to ensure we consult upon, engage on the feedback mechanisms and have openness and transparency about what we do. So it's not, Margaret at this stage isn't doing a review of all of these documents to say how effective they are at delivering that. So at the moment we're saying these are the things, the policies and plans that are in place in the council to help ensure we've got effective governance. The annual governance statement as part of the accounts that comes next time starts to get into more detail about how effective are those arrangements. But I don't disagree with the comment that, you know, an effective constitution is clearly really important in this.
Thank you. Councillor McDermott-Hill, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, just very briefly, and again, it's sort of more like an observation. It's just that sometimes in the work that the council does, which is obviously very, you know, it's sort of, you know, ambitious is the word that I hear an awful lot of, and there's some parts of working of the council in relation to constitutional matters that sometimes things in practice don't necessarily come up to the Constitution. So I think maybe that could be an aim to look at in terms of how we how the council sort of governs itself. And I think if we consider that going forward, that can be a positive thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Clifton, I think you wanted to come in, and then we'll wrap up. Councillor Clifton. Okay, maybe
I'm sorry, I thought I'd unmuted myself, but I didn't. Just on page 30 of the paper, so this is under Principle G, there is a reference. It says, welcome peer challenge, reviews and inspections from regulatory bodies and implements recommendations. And it says the implementation of the key recommendations from external inspections. And just to say, the Local Government Association does offer a service of organising peer reviews, which we haven't used all that much. We just haven't used it for the peer review planning committee. But just to say, I think it is something that we could use from time to time. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Does some of the officers want to come back on that?
Yeah, I don't disagree that peer reviews are an effective way of getting feedback on performance. It's obviously not my decision what peer reviews we do and when. It's a wider consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to a vote on the recommendations at that point. And in this case, there's only the one, which is 2.1, to approve the Code of Corporate Governance. So if any members could let me know if they have an issue with that in the chat. Okay, thank you very much. So we will consider the code to be approved. And at this point, we will move to the audit section of the agenda. So Vice Chair Councillor Hicks will now take over. And as previously stated, if Councillor Hicks loses connection at any point, I will resume chairing the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weatherlake. We'll move on to item 7 now, if we can, please, which is the review of the procurement of main contractors for major construction projects. Could I ask the officer to present the report for this item, please?
Yes, indeed. This is Paul Aljo, the Head of Programme and Project Management, London Borough of Sutton. What I'll do, Councillor, if I may, is just walk you through the report, and then please, if we have any questions. So this report looks at how LBS, the Programme and Project Management team, procure main contractors. So this doesn't cover consultants or any other professionals, but it's main contractors. It looks back at the previous scenario between 2009 and 2015, which was the Partnering Contractors Framework, which we ran in cooperation with London Borough of Merton. Some of you may remember that. It delivered quite a few benefits, fast call-off, good value, best fit contractors. When that expired, or before that expired, we were using from 2014 onwards the London Construction Programme, LCP, Major Works Framework. That's now in its 2019 version. We have had some issues with that framework because, namely, and the most important, is the cheapest contractor wins the job, basically. And that may be despite previous poor performance. And we've also found a bit of lack of interest from contractors in pricing jobs, which is unusual in this current market. So due to the LCP limitations, we've been using other frameworks as well and doing a best fit approach to jobs. So as a programme or a project comes up, we've been looking at the best fit framework or the best fit sort of way to procure, such as the Crown Commercial Services. Sutton Standing Orders promotes the use of frameworks, and we sort of endorse the use of frameworks also. And the report looks at options sort of A to E initially, A being for larger projects over £1 million, like the LCP framework, which we would hold a mini competition, or an open tender via pro contract. And then it goes down to sort of D and E, which are for smaller projects, say D, for example, being the pro contract quick quote, which is under £100,000, or we could use the Mighty, who are our FM partner for projects under 110k. Then the report looks going forward at option F, which is to create a new contractor framework, and we would need to do that in cooperation with other boroughs because of the cost, which could amount to approximately £150,000. And that was based on the last framework we set up in 2009. That's not allowing for inflation. And then the report goes on to look at the uncertainty in the market, and that's sort of twofold. Firstly, the uncertainty of Brexit and the EU procurement rules and our involvement in them. And it also goes on to talk about the market conditions, which are not only because of Brexit, but COVID-19, the market's in a different place at the moment. So it talks about reviewing this in 12 to 18 months, which is a sensible thing. And then the report recommends, finally, that we, for the time being, until this review is done, we continue with the best fit procurement options, and that we also, as I've just mentioned, look at setting up the actual partnering framework with another local authority, and then we take that report back to S&R. Does that give you a broad overview, Chair?
Thank you very much for that. Now, do members have any questions for Mr. Aggio on this? If you do, would you be able to question the chat box, and I'll go through them one at a time? Mr. Parrott, you have a couple of questions.
Yes, just a few. Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of questions on 5.4 in the report, which is page 33. Option A, you mentioned choosing a suitable framework and holding a mini competition. There are, I believe, frameworks on the market where you don't need to hold a competition because they are single supplier frameworks. So I just wanted to sort of make sure that was in your question. Yes,
Councillor Parrott, that's a really good question. And I've actually raised that with our procurement colleagues because the old partnering framework that I mentioned that was in place from 2009 to 2015, that was a direct call-off framework that we set up. So we had overhead profits and prelims already priced, so we could actually do a best fit analysis with the contractor to the project and call them straight off, which was, for me, a preferred option. Yeah. I'm not aware, well, I was told by procurement that we actually have to have a mini competition via a framework. And that was sort of how Sutton liked to do it to show best value. Now, I could be wrong, Councillor, but that's what I've been told.
Okay, thanks. And my second question is on page 34, 5.5 option F. Again, it's not really a question, just something for consideration, which is that setting up your own framework. Frameworks generally involve some kind of fee to the administrator of the framework. So I just wondered whether one of the advantages of doing that would be a revenue stream, albeit not enormous, but a revenue stream nonetheless back to the council.
Yeah, if I go back to the previous framework we set up, it covered its cost, its running cost, but it didn't recover the actual funds to set it up. So once the initial setup was done, then it would cover its running costs with staff time, etc., to maintain and manage it and sort of do the KPIs, etc. But there was the initial upfront cost, which from memory, it could never have really recovered. Well, it would have taken quite a few years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Question. Thank you. Councillor McDermott-Hill, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. A very quick one. On page 32, on item 4.1, there's a reference, a historic reference to there being a sort of a direct poor experience with the contractor, but the contractor isn't actually named. Is there a reason for the contractor not being named, and is it possible for that contractor to be named here and now?
Yeah, sorry. This report follows on from a report we took to Asset and Governance, Audit and Governance, about the failure of Lakehouse Construction Limited on the Hackbridge Primary School new build project, and they were the contractor this report refers to.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a follow-up question? Thank you.
I had a suspicion that was the case, but yes, that's good to have that that confirmed. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Nanda, you have a question. Councillor Nanda?
Yeah, I just managed to unmute. Yeah, my question will be from the 4.1, following on Councillor Murdoch. We have identified the issues from the past, and we have talked about the option considered as for the near future. But in the past report, last October when we gone through it, were you able to recuperate some of the money which we were talking about at the time, or this is not appropriate at this point to talk about? Thank you.
No, I would certainly like to answer that if I may and provide an update. So there is no, well, basically, Councillor, there were two options we were progressing. One was the administrators for Lakehouse. And we didn't expect to recover monies from them, but we have put in a claim. Not surprisingly, they haven't come back. But then the one that we do anticipate recovering funds from is the bond. And we put in the claim to the bondsman in January of this year. And then they were silent for a while. We chased them up several times. And then in May, according to my notes here, they came back and asked us a series of questions, and for us to recap all of the payments and processes and certificates for them throughout that job, which we duly did. And then we chased them again actually a few weeks back, and they have now assigned a surveyor to the case. Now, there is no contractual time frame for them to settle. And obviously them asking us all these questions, in my opinion, is a delaying tactic, but nonetheless, they have actually assigned a surveyor. So I will be bringing a report back to Audit and Governance when this is resolved, so you can see the final picture. Thank you.
Councillor Nand, did you have a follow-up question?
Thank you for that. My second question will be on the subject is, you have highlighted in the near future that you will be doing a due diligence checks and everything before you award the contract. So while you're doing the due diligence checks, will you be doing it after we award the contract as well, every 6 months or some spot checks or something like that throughout the project? Because if this project is going to be 18 months or 24 months, what we have learned from the lake house, anything could happen after 6 months or anything like that. So will there any sort of checks will be carried out while they are carrying out this project? Thank you.
That's a very good question, Councillor. We carry out a check initially, even and the sort of the report, the findings of the audit on that, whether even if we're pulling a contractor from a framework where they've already been pre-checked and pre-vetted, we would do our own Dun and Bradshaw or another check on them before we entered into contract. What you're asking is if it's a long contract, which many of our contracts are, would we do financial checks, for example, at every 6 months? That is a good question, and so far we haven't been in that position. But I'm going to sort of say yes, we will. My answer would be we would only do checks during a contract if we had reasonable doubt that the contractor was either not paying subcontractors, or they were in some sort of financial danger, or they'd been bought out by a third party. But what you're saying makes perfect sense to me, so we will endeavour to do that.
Can I come in, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. We might be in danger of rerunning quite a long conversation on the audit report last time, but I think it's worth highlighting on page 35 in 6.1. I just don't want members to get the wrong impression. We did do due diligence on Lakehouse, and the framework provider did, and financial checks were ran, and the council took the appropriate action as soon as Paul's highlighted before, as soon as we had the view that there was Lakehouse running into problems. So yeah, and as it says at the bottom of 6.1, the risk is not reduced by any of the alternative procurement options discussed in this report. So there's a wider consideration of the kind of most appropriate procurement route to get best value for money for the council, which this paper's about, but it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't eliminate the risk of contractor failure in this market.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we go on to Richard, Councillor Clifton? You have a question?
Thank you, Chair. It was partly almost a sort of comment. I sometimes like to try and sort of stand away from papers like this and say, well, what is the sort of fundamental problem with this? And I feel that there is an issue which is not as raised in the paper, but in the comments that were made in introducing the paper, which is the pressure that exists in many of these frameworks to always go for the lowest price. I found that my career in a number of public sector organisations, I took part in quite a few contracting operations and experiences, and there is a sort of pressure to go for the lowest price bid that you get. Although at times you don't have confidence that these people are actually going to be able to deliver it on the basis of the price that they've quoted. But people feel that they might be criticised if they have gone for a higher price bid than they might have done. So I think in this paper you set out sort of 6 options, and in a way I think that you're saying, well, there's a degree of discretion in the way in which it's approached, but there's some further work to be done. I'll be interested to see what comes out of this further work. But there is a real difficulty, I think, for people who are trying to take these decisions in these circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Matty, you have a question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I just cannot believe what went on with this. I mean, it's no secret that Hackney Homes, London Borough of Hackney, have received a huge dossier about from a whistleblower, because we've been dealing with whistleblowers, about some of the practices alleged against Lakehouse. There was a full investigation by Hackney Council. The Metropolitan Police were involved. But still, with all this going on, we decided that these were the best people to build a school. You know, it's absolutely incredible that the partner of the monitoring officer was given this massive dossier all about Hackney, about what had been going on at Hackney Homes, and yet the council just walked into it and didn't, you know, I mean, you only had to Google Lake House and it would have come up. The Evening Standard ran headlines about what was going on, and I just cannot believe that we've done this. You know, what happens is that the council likes to put its head down and wants to get on with things. I mean, the fact that the school was even built with an air quality assessment.
Councillor Matty, I will call you to a halt there. I understand.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I'll conclude. All I'm saying is that anybody that read any newspaper, could have thought to myself, hello, this is not, especially in light of the Grenfell fire, when they were one of the contractors that was meant to be putting in fire alarm, fire detection equipment.
Yeah, Councillor Matty, I've got the point. Now, I'm going to ask the officers the question. When did the information about Lake House become available during this process of tendering for this job? And was it available at the point when the job was let, or when was it known?
Chair, I'll let Paul come in a second, but this report isn't really about Lake House, and we did have a full debate about Lake House, and Councillor Matty made all those points, and I made a number of points back to Councillor Matty then. I don't know whether this is the second go at that decision, but that's in the past, isn't it? This is about how we set up a framework in the future. So we had a full debate last time, but I'll let Paul come in with the facts.
Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. I haven't actually got all the dates in front of me, but Councillor Matty did put in an FOY or a member's inquiry with those dates which we gave him. And from memory, and this is from memory, and I will check, we actually were in contract when that, or had agreed a contract when that was actually in the public domain, as in the press, because, like you said, we would have known about it as well. So I think we were before that, and that was fully answered in the member's inquiry at the time, as well as in the report we took to Audit and Governance the first time covering the matter.
Fine, thank you for that. Then I accept that as an answer, and that we go from there. Can I ask a question, please? Because I look back at the audit report to Audit and Governance in October last year, and it said that, well, this report here today says that we were forced to take a contract on price only, but the audit report says in section 2.5, I think it is, last time round, said that the evaluation was based on quality and price. What was the evaluation? What was the evaluation of quality in that?
Yeah, I think basically thank you, Councillor. Sorry, how we normally do it is price is 60%. And then the quality and some other issues are less than 40%. So price would always win.
Okay.
Chair, can I come in? They do need. We talked about this last time as well. They do need to pass certain quality thresholds to get onto the framework. So if members are thinking anyone could put in a bid and get the job, that's not the case. They got onto a kind of construction framework led by another local authority, and were assessed as capable of delivering this scale of work. I think what Paul's saying, once people get over that threshold, it will then be based on price.
It's very difficult to get rid of them, or impossible to get them off the list, if that's the case, I assume.
I think, I think that will be down to the framework provider, not the people who use the framework.
Yeah, okay. Can you ask me, I went back again and looked at the timetable of events for the Hackbury School, and I was a bit confused by it, because paragraph 1.3 says the Children, Family and Education Committee met on the 23rd of March to approve the capital expenditure for the contract, but the contract was let on the 18th of March. Contract was awarded on the 18th of March before the capital had been agreed. Is that an error in the report?
I'll have to get back to you on that, Chair. We certainly had agreement to proceed to contract at the time. I do recall that, so maybe it's an error of dates in that report, but we can certainly check that for you.
Okay, that's fine. How long were you actually in the process of letting it, from initial invitations to final selection? How long did it take?
It's months.
It was months, was it? That's
Well,
even with the shortened timetable.
Well, you've got sort of a tendering process where they're given sort of a period of time to actually price the work, and then there's a tender review period, and then you sort of answer any sort of questions from there and do the tender review report. And then obviously you're, once the committee approval is gained, you're sort of free to enter into contract if it's the correct price that's been agreed.
Okay.
So there is sort of a formal process to go through.
Okay, thanks very much. There are no more questions, no more debate on the subject, so can we now move to the vote on this?
Oh, sorry, quick question, Councillor Hicks. Sorry.
Yes.
I want to make a question. Sorry.
Okay.
So just very, very quickly, in terms of just this point, Councillor Hicks, in what you were just saying there, were you implying that there was an issue with the tendering process in terms of the actual process itself, or?
I wondered
were you just merely asking questions?
I was asking questions in detail because I was interested in whether there was any pressure to complete the tender quickly.
Because I think what it sounds like to me is that the tendering process itself is something that's been worked on with other local authorities, as it was. I can't remember the names of them. And it seems like to me, from what Richard said, is that it was formed on the basis of meeting the criteria first, then price. Now, I mean, as a method in terms of when you're thinking about public funds, that doesn't sound necessarily wrong to me. I appreciate when you get to the minutiae of it, there might be issues, but I think the point that needs to be stated and stressed is that the agenda item that we're discussing right now is about a new framework.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to be focusing on that. And I think the point Paul made about how, because of various issues that have been coming along, this needs to be further looked at the next meeting. So I'd suggest that we move with this to the next meeting to look at that when times, be it COVID, be it Brexit, are more clear.
Well, can I ask the officers if next meeting is too early, or would it need to be later than that?
This is Paul Aljo speaking. In my opinion, that would be too early because we need to move the process forward, and the report mentions the review to take place in 12 to 18 months. Now, that might be too long, so we might have to do an interim in the meantime, but that was the feeling.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean, yeah, absolutely fine. That's fine by me.
Okay, fine. Councillor McDermott-Hill, you've got a question.
Actually, thank you for inviting me in, but I think my question is probably more appropriate for the next item, although it is related to this particular issue.
You've gone, unfortunately.
Could I make just a couple of, please?
Councillor McDermott-Hill, are you there?
Yes. Sorry, I think I might have been covering myself on the microphone. No, sorry, what I wanted to say was that I've got a very quick one, but it's probably more appropriate for the next item, even though it is related to the same issue.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matty, what is it you want to ask us?
Very quickly, with a lot of these things where they seem to go wrong, you feel that the politics or the expediency takes over. I mean, with this particular project, first of all, it was building a school on a greenfield site, which the council in its local plan said it didn't want to do. If it was building on metropolitan open land, and the trouble is that officers must feel under pressure when they see the politicians, if you like, in one, with one voice declaring we must build a school in Belmont because we need to build on brownfield sites, and then and then in the same week we're told that we're building a school on a greenfield site because we've managed to take a bit of metropolitan open land, and I'm afraid that this to get things quickly, for political expediency, it must influence officers, because they must think, well, I'm dealing with people that are keep making contradictory statements. Obviously, they're just politicians, and it must be very difficult for officers when you've got this completely different approach. Saying one thing and doing another, and I'm afraid that it must be very disheartening for officers trying to deal with people who, are always trying to do a positive spin on things which that they're meant to be opposed to. But that's just a comment.
Okay, thank you. I don't expect officers to respond to that. Do you, Councillor Matthew? No. I worked in local.
If I could just give another example, the poor
no, Councillor Matty, please. Enough.
It's a dilemma for them.
It is a dilemma. I worked in local government for many years, and I understood the political imperatives to get things done, and the officer's job is to deliver it in the best way possible. So there is always an issue of timescales. Things need to be done quickly or slowly. So I sympathise with anybody in that position, but that shouldn't mean the officers do the job anything other than to their best abilities. That's the way it would be. Okay. Any more questions on the subject? No. Can we then move to the vote? The recommendations are to note that following this review of the council will continue the current best fit approach of choosing the optimum procurement route to suit each particular project. To note that the council will consider an additional option of setting up a regional contractor framework again in 12 to 18 months' time, when the legislative and business context is stabilised post-Brexit and post-COVID. The report will be referred to the Strategy and Resources Committee for consideration. Can we agree that report? Thank you. I think that's agreed. Can we now move on to item 8, please, which is the Internal Audit Progress Report?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the audit progress report, progress against the audit plan that was agreed here last May. Sorry. It just summarises the reviews that we've carried out and the days that have been delivered, which are set out in table 1. As you can see, we've actually over-delivered on days. I just wanted to point out it's not an additional cost to the council. It's just as a result of additional work maybe that has been spent on some of the limited assurance reports or additional follow-up meetings that have taken place. So we have actually got 84% substantial assurance at the time of the report, which is good. I've just detailed the limited assurances that are on page 39. Some of those I've already reported up, so it's just giving you the update of the 2 latest ones, which was the starters and leavers. I think we actually did discuss that last time, and then Bandon Hill Primary School. So just giving you a summary of that. And the as I've mentioned before, all reports we follow up all the priority 1 recommendations, which I've given you an update on the appendix of those. So we only have 7 at the moment, which we have provided a comment on. So I think we've still got 1 outstanding from 18-19. So I've just had an update on that they are they haven't actually managed to get an automated process in place, but they're going to start doing a manual process for the VAT returns. So hopefully we can get that action closed off shortly. It's just if anyone's got any questions.
Are there any questions on the report, the councillors? Councillor Nanda.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. On the point 4.9, that there was an audit found out that there's a 2 staff left and they haven't had a what do you call leavers thing. So therefore, they had the access to the IT for 3 months, 1 to 6 months, and also they have outlined the process as well, what they normally do in terms when people leave and all of the things. Can you give us a assurance that there are strict procedures has been put in place so this won't happen in the near future? Thank you.
It's probably worth me coming in, isn't it, Margaret?
Okay. Yep.
It's just, I find it uncomfortable if you're asking internal audit to give you those assurances, because they're the ones asking us for the assurances. So I'm not sure Margaret should answer on behalf of the organisation. We did a couple of yes. So it's got senior management attention because I think there's obviously the audit identifies some gaps in the process. Most of those gaps were around interim staff, because the way interim staff leave an organisation isn't quite as clear cut, I suppose, as permanent staff. Permanent staff, you go through a process, you resign or you leave, your payroll process is stopped, and that all triggers the other processes around the leaver. So ID card, IT, etc. Sometimes interim staff, particularly in areas where we have more use of interim staff, like social work, sometimes interim staff can obviously leave quicker because they're not on the same period of notice. And also, when they stop doing timesheets, they stop getting paid. So sometimes a manager thinks they're finished, kind of thing, rather than with a payroll system, you have to finish the process, otherwise you're still paying the member staff. So we've done a lot of communication across the organisation with managers about the importance of this. So the first thing is about accountability. I suppose for managers in the organisation, it's their responsibility to ensure this is done. It can't be done for them by the organisation. We've also made it improve the controls between kind of HR and IT, so that when interim staff leave, there's kind of an automatic notification. And we're also now doing kind of monthly checks so managers get a list of people who may still have access. So a number of kind of mitigating controls put in place, but just to stress, it's mainly been around interim staff and agency staff, not permanent staff.
Thank you. Councillor Nanda, did you have a follow-up?
No, that's thank you for it.
Okay. Councillor Clifton, you've got a question.
Thank you. I've just, so it's maybe a bit of a detail, but I just want to ask on page 44, I was just interested, I noticed item 23, it says register office, disposal of certificates. I don't know if that means the registrar's office, which is in my ward. And it says advisory report. I'm not sure I've come across that before as an animal. So it's not, doesn't seem to be offering assurance, but it's advisory. Could you just explain? There are a number of these. Is that a new development, or have you done these advisory reports generally in the past?
Yes, we have. Sorry, is the registrar office. We have been asked before to come in and assist them with disposal of certificates. So we did do an advisory report more about how they store them and some of the process. So we didn't do it as an assurance piece. Actually, on that one, I just sent my apprentice in, and they just did some work with them. So that was more assistance, and it was just a couple of days' work. The transforming families I put down as an advisory. It's a grant claim, and we do a sample check. So we just pulled a report together on. It's more about saying how we picked our sample, what issues we've found, if we have found any, and that adjustments they've made. So it's not really providing full assurance on it. We don't do it as an assurance, we do it as advisory. So that's why I've called it advisory. And then the appointee and deputyship, we were asked to provide some advice on the new system that was coming in, but I've got that on the plan for this year to do an actual audit on it. So the assurance work is always where it's we've actually looked at the controls in place and we've done a full piece of work, but sometimes we're asked to come in and just give advice. So I would just document we have done some work, but it's just advisory work. That's why they'd be referenced like that.
So these are circumstances in which you are asked, in a sense, to act as sort of a consultant and to come in. But you're asked by management to come in and give some advice.
I suppose I'm trying to justify because the days we're spending that to reflect, to say this, we have done these pieces of work as well as assurance work. So you can see the full picture of the work that we actually do. So it is responding to management asking us to advise them on things.
I think it's quite legitimate. You should do such work when it is requested.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up question, Councillor Clifton?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Steers, then, you have a question.
Yes, good evening.
Hello, sir.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Right. I just suppose a little bit of concern, really, from the Director of Finance. His explanation of starters and leavers didn't give me too much confidence. Interims this, interim that. I've actually been in charge of a payroll of 10,000, where somebody actually was, sadly, was caught and they went to prison for nearly a £200,000 fraud. I didn't feel that he was could give us confidence. Interim people this, interim that. For me, they're an employee. We take them in and we should have the same governance arrangements, the same separation of duties and controls. So I don't, and having been the lead counsellor for social services, I appreciate there's a big turnover, but that really is no excuse when the council has been in existence for quite some time about having decent controls. So I'd just like to comment on that one, please.
Can the officers respond, please?
Can I come back?
Please, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so so the issue, there's no issues about overpayment in here, to be clear, for the first bit. So it doesn't matter how many, 10,000, 100,000, 1,000. We've not overpaid any staff. There's no issues. The issue, why I was, well, interim, as you said, why I was referring to interim was just to say there's a different process whereby interims leave an organisation than permanent staff leave the organisation in terms of stopping their pay. So I think managers have believed that their person's leaving, the person knows they're leaving, they're not approving timesheets, so there's no pay leaving the organisation. There was a gap in the process that managers also have to finish that process by making sure their IT is removed as well. And there's 2 cases, I think, that was raised here where that hadn't happened. So what we've done is made sure we reiterated to all managers. We can't do that for managers. If a manager in children's services doesn't do that, I can't be running around and making sure they do it. What we can do is make sure that's crystal clear that that's their responsibility. So we've done that one. And 2, put some mitigating controls in place so we don't have to wait for an audit to pick this up. We've got monthly reports that pick up whether someone's left the organisation and their IT hasn't been removed. So hopefully that gives you slightly more confidence that we've taken this seriously and putting in place some action to address it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I would like just to come back and say that has given me more confidence. I know it's not an easy place to where we are at the moment or the way to manage changeover, but that's given me a bit more confidence. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there's any more questions. Councillor McDermott Hills has to leave the meeting because he feels unwell. So there's another question from Councillor Nanda, I believe, on question 8B.
I think I got a question on 8B. I think I can produce the report yet. Or can I ask now? Or?
No. Just I thought if you want to put questions in, make them relevant to the item on the agenda. So we'll go and move on to the next one. Thank you. There are no more questions on this report. So can we agree the recommendations, which is to note and comment on the attached progress report. Thank you. We seem to have general agreement on that. Can we move on to item 9 now, which is the Internal Audit Annual Plan 2020-21?
Thank you, Chair. So this lays out the plan for this year. I have 640 days that I've working to. Normally, when I set a plan together, there's a lot of discussion, which there has been with these, going to DMTs, talking to officers, working out the risks of the authority. So obviously I had pulled the plan together following all that, and then we had the pandemic to happen. So I've had to go back and make some revisions to the plan. So you wouldn't have got the first one I'd pulled together. So what I've decided to do is actually put it into quarters, which you'll see on page 59. And I was going to propose that I'll come back each quarter, and if there needs a revision, I'll update you and make sure that I keep those up to date, and I'll keep talking to the directors and assistant directors to make sure that we're focusing on key risks, because it's a changing picture. The other thing I was just going to say, obviously on quarter one, is it did impact on being able to carry on with some of our work. The work we've done is obviously pulling together the annual government statement and troubled families, and some of the work that and the cemetery we were able to get on with. Some work we've been able to get on with. We have been getting more involved in advisory work to do with government grants on discretionary grants and infection control and pieces of work like that. So they're all of added value. So I just sort of make that point. But the plan, the rest of the plan, I have tried to stick with some of the obviously the agreed audits, but also put in some other ones that were such as adult social care easement, obviously as an effect of what's happening with the in the council. So each of these audits that I've put on, and also on the temporary housing and things like that, we will be having discussions about timing and about the scope of the audit. So there'll be more work going on there. So that's really all I wanted to say to you, to draw your attention to. So if I have any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this report from the councillors? Councillor Nanda, was it to do with this report?
No, I think I missed it. It was supposed to be on the 8.B.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed that one. So now we are.
Well, let's talk to it separately, and if there's any question, we'll put it in writing. Okay. Thank you. Okay. There's a tremendous amount of work on COVID-19 in this work plan. 55 days in the first quarter, I think it is. Have you used that time?
So the other thing I hadn't mentioned is we redeployed one member of staff to help with the shielding work. So we obviously got to the point where we had some staff unable to carry on. They were able to work at home, but they weren't able to necessarily get on with audit work. In order to keep them busy and useful in Sutton, I actually got one of them to move over. So those days were an estimate. They've actually now come back to doing audit work. So it's the actual days spent will probably be less than that. But I did build that in.
Right.
So the 15 days, Margaret. That's about an actual audit, isn't it? And
sorry, yeah.
And the 40 days was more redeployment of a member staff just to support the council's efforts.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, fine. Are there any further questions from members? Okay. Can we then go to the recommendations, which are to approve the internal audit plan as set out in Appendix A, to improve the internal audit charter and strategy for 2021.
Sorry, Chair, could I just come in?
Sorry, Councillor Steers.
Yeah,
Please.
it's really about the COVID work. Are we doing any risk assessment on money that the council or on behalf of the government has had to pay out? And are we looking at risk areas around this COVID work? And maybe I don't need you to go into the detail of those areas because it would preempt maybe some of the work you're doing. But have you highlighted any some areas, and would you be targeting those?
We have the COVID-19 response review is going to be looking at some of the grants. I still have to get the brief agreed, and I've got a meeting with the director in a couple of weeks. But the idea of that was to look at some of the funding that we've had and how that money has been distributed and what decisions the council's made. Obviously, I need to talk through how. But we have been asked to get involved in the infection control, some of the processes that the council's put in place. So we have done some advisory work already on that, and we've also been helping on the discretionary grants. So I just wanted to get I do want to have a look at some of the other areas as well, and funding and how that's how we've managed it.
And that's funding going out maybe into the community, into businesses or individuals, because quite frankly, we've all been through some difficult times, and we would want that money placed in the right places to the right people. So I'm pleased that you're got this in the programme.
I suspect the government will also come back at some point to ask for sign off, and so hopefully that would help to provide assurance. Because I presume the director will have to sign off some returns on that he's happy that it's been.
I'm sure Richard will do that.
Yeah.
And he's confident. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can we agree the recommendations? Right, we seem to have general agreement on that. So can we move on to item 10, which is the whistleblowing policy and anti-money laundering policy updates? Thank you. Can the officer make a presentation on this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it's me again.
We're keeping you busy tonight, aren't we?
Yeah. The whistleblowing policy and anti-money laundering update. Council currently has a policy in place, so it's a refresh of the policies. So the whistleblowing policy, I've done a check against good practice and just refined some of the wording and expanded some of the wording, which I pointed out on page 76 and 77. So I've highlighted the areas that I've sort of focused or put a bit more on. So that's to do with the protection that people have, and if they harassment and those sort of explanations. So the policy, the whistleblowing policy, has been to the joint council and union joint employee council and employee committee before this. So just let you know that. On the anti-money laundering policy, that because it hadn't been updated for a while, it just had to the two updates and to make reference to the fact that it has a regular risk assessment, and also the reference to the agency was needed changing and updating. So there's two changes. I'll just go say on the whistleblowing and anti-money laundering, particularly on the whistleblowing, we have had discussions with HR, and so the next stage after the policy is then to look at how that gets promoted, and also to look through the process of how the council deals with them, how they're logging them, and how the consideration of whistleblowing, whether it's whistleblowing or not, and how we report back to committee and things like that. So this is just agreeing the policy at this stage, but we will be moving on then to discussing process with the monetary officer and HR.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Clifton, you've got a question. Councillor Clifton.
Yeah, sorry, I've now managed to unmute myself. I'm now trying to find the piece of paper that I wanted to ask you about. Yeah, I was just going to say, yes, you're right. It came to the Council Employees Joint Committee. One of the comments that was made there was that on page 89, you've got a list of officers with telephone numbers. I didn't know whether these telephone numbers might come out of date, including the Assistant Director, People and Organisation Development. I don't know why it's the Assistant Director. Is there a Director of People and Organisation Development? So there's somewhere in there, which I'm now searching for, about malicious provisions. I can't find it.
Page 80.
Sorry?
Page 85, malicious.
Yes, sorry. I'm terribly sorry. This does get a bit difficult where you're trying to look at the screen and look at different papers. Page 85. Yeah, raising unfounded and malicious concerns. The sense that, yeah, when it appears that there are clear grounds suggesting that you may have acted frivolously, maliciously, or vexatiously, this will be taken seriously and may constitute a disciplinary offence. I suppose one does have to have something like that in there. Although I'm less convinced by the word frivolously than maliciously or vexatiously, because people have different judgments, and what might appear to somebody to be frivolous might appear to somebody else to be, not so frivolous. So I think that we did have some slight hesitation about the use of that language. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Mahasham, you have a question.
Sorry, did you want me to answer the question on?
No, yes, fine, please. Yes.
The officer. We have an Assistant Director of People and Organisational Development, which is HR in old language. We don't have a director. They report into me.
Okay.
They report into me as the director of the Resources Directorate. So there's a IT, HR, finance, etc. report into me.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Then, any follow-ups, Mr. Councillor Clifton?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mahasham. You have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Quick one from me. Just this, I think it was the same bit as Councillor Clifton pointed out, 13.4. I thought Councillor Clifton was going to ask the same question, but very quick one from me. Where it says the following officers can be contacted, there's numbers there for everyone bar the Chief Exec. Now, is there any specific reason why? I was just wondering why that was. Although I can appreciate why it might not be at the same time too.
Sorry, I don't know. It probably should go in there actually. Sorry, that might be an over.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, if we're going to mention her as a contact, then we should give the contact number. Otherwise, don't mention her in the first place.
Yeah.
Any follow-up to that? Okay. Can I ask a couple of questions, please? On 4.2 on page 84, the policy applies to contractors working for the council and partner agencies. This has always been a concern of mine, that we're now going into an area where we're getting partners to carry out services on behalf of the council. How are they going to be informed of the whistleblowing process?
Well, the copy of the policy should be on the website and the intranet, so that's how we promote it. So if they went looking for it, they should be able to find it.
Okay, but if someone is working in an organisation which is a separate company with its own management structure, how would they know to bother to look at the council's website?
I think we could use, Chair, if I could come in, I think we could use our We could work with our contract. We obviously have contract managers with each of our private sector partners. We could work with them to make sure, as part of the various communications we have and expect to share with employees of those organisations, this becomes one of them.
Yeah, I'm particularly worried about those organisations providing care services to members of the public.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, that's good.
Yeah.
In 14.2, it says an appropriate investigating officer is then appointed by the relevant service. What happens if the person making the complaint doesn't think that person carrying out the investigation is relevant or suitable?
Stephen, do you want to come in? Because sometimes that would come to you, wouldn't it?
Yes, normally what would happen is there would be somebody would be appointed. I think if the person who was the complainant felt that the person doing the investigation wasn't suitable, that they would raise that through the either with the, dare I say, the person who was investigating, or alternatively otherwise through the whistleblowing policy. I have to say, it doesn't normally happen, because normally the person doing the investigation is someone senior, and it doesn't normally arise.
Okay, it's just that there needs to be just some sort of escape clause for those who feel they're being cornered.
Noted, yes, yeah.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions on this report? Thank you. So then can we go to the vote, which is, the recommendations are to approve the anti-money laundering policy and to comment on and approve the revised whistleblowing policy. Can we agree those recommendations? Right, we have general agreement on that one. Can we then move to item 11? And Mr. Simpson, do you want to present the report?
It's Mr. Holland, I think, is going to present it, Chair.
Oh, okay, fine. Sorry, you're right. I should learn to read, shouldn't I? Mr. Holland, I do apologise.
We can't hear you, Kevin.
Mr. Holland, can't hear you.
You're not on mute.
There's a sound, but not much. Shall we move on to item 12 whilst we try and sort out the technical problem?
You may want to come in via the phone line, Kevin, if that doesn't work. Do you want to do item?
I think if we move on to item 12, please, and then we can come back to this one once we've got sorted out what's going on. Item 12 is the external audit plan for 2019-20, and I'll leave that to officers to present, please.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm Vicky Goddard, the AD for Finance at Sutton. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction and then hand over to Keith from Grant Thornton, who's going to take you through the key points of the plan. But the purposes of bringing this here is to give an update on the interim audit, which was finished in February, just before we went into lockdown, I believe. That interim audit went well, and in fact, no major issues have been identified or areas that we need to correct, so that's good news. Since then, obviously, we have had the pandemic and the lockdown, and that significantly changes the risks that the council's facing. So as a result of that, we have needed to revisit the external audit plan for the accounts that would usually be taking place in July. So what this report does is it sets out what our auditors will be focusing on, what those kind of key risks that they would be concerned about are, and they will be consistent across local government. They won't just be Sutton risks, and how auditors will test those when it comes to the audit period. The other thing I just wanted to highlight is that the statutory deadlines have changed for the accounts. So usually we would be required to publish draft accounts by the end of May, then go into the audit period and publish final accounts by the end of July. Those have been pushed back. We're now required to have the draft available by the end of July and final and audited accounts by the end of September. In Sutton, we're actually aiming to do things slightly earlier than that for the draft. We're aiming to finish by the end of June to enable the audit to start in July, so that we've got a bit longer to do that, which may be needed with remote working and the rest of it. So I'll now hand over to Keith, who's hopefully on the call from Grant Thornton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Hi, everyone. My name is Keith.
Hello there.
My name is
Are you there, Keith? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Very faint
very
voice.
faint.
Oh, sorry. How about now? Can you hear me?
Better.
A bit better.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Keith Mungadzi, and I'm the External Audit Manager for Sutton from Grant Thornton. I'll take the paper as read. So this is the plan for the main council and Sutton Pension Fund for the year ended 31st March 2020. If I can take you to pages 127 of the pack, this highlights the in terms of key headlines, this highlights our key risks for both Sutton Council and the pension fund. As you can see, we've got management override of controls, valuations of property, valuations of pension fund net liability, COVID-19, as Victoria mentioned, valuations of level 3 investments. These risks are similar to other organizations, apart from the COVID-19, which is new this year. If I sort of move down a little bit, if I can just highlight on pages 140. So in terms of the risks, the detailed work against these risks, this is detailed in the audit plan. And in terms of the audits themselves, we're planning to start the audit next month, as Victoria mentioned, on receipt of the draft accounts, with a view of having a draft AFR in September. I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors, please? It's very quiet. Okay, thank you. Am I right in assuming that we, despite all the problems we've had this year with COVID, we are progressing rapidly to closing the accounts and having them completed? Mr. Simpson?
Come in.
Okay.
End of June, Chair. End of June is the date we hope to conclude.
So despite all the problems, you've managed to get it done quickly and on time, which is very commendable. Thank you very much for that. Very helpful. Are there any questions at all?
Yes, could I try?
Question, please.
I put in the chat that I wanted to raise a point.
Okay, thank you.
We'll just say, I'll just say that obviously, in terms of the financial situation of the council, I mean, this must have massively changed, since the council adopted its budget. As I understand it, our income streams are in difficulty. We've had to abandon parking, close the leisure centre, etc., which generated funding for the council. And I would guess that there's probably a lot of people, as a result of the pandemic, who've lost their jobs and are in great difficulty, and that collection of council tax is going to be very much more difficult. So there's an income problem, and also there have been a great many additional demands on the council. I don't know if Mr. Simpson, when I was finished speaking, wants to to add something to this, because of the need to operate the hub, etc., and all the things that the council's had to do. And I read from time to time in the newspapers that the government has generously given some additional sum of money to local authorities. My deep suspicion is that it's going to be nothing like adequate. But I then think, well, okay, Sutton will be in difficulty, but then every single local authority, it seems to me, is going to be in great difficulty as a result of this. I don't know how if the world's ever going to be right again. The other thing I was going to say, I think ought to be said at this meeting on both this audit and the internal audit is looking. All these things are looking at how the council performs and it maintains its workload, maintains its output. I just get the impression that there's been an absolute revolution in terms of people who were been done their jobs in a particular way for years, suddenly having to work at home, work remotely. You have to spend all day sitting looking at these wretched computers and a completely different manner of work. I get the impression people have done brilliantly in terms of doing this. Which I think we as councillors ought to say that, and ought to say that to the staff. That it does seem to me, just looking at the sort of weekly reports that we get from the chief executive, etc., as to what's been done whilst during the pandemic period, that I think a great deal of really good work has been done in very difficult circumstances. I'd just like to take the opportunity of this meeting, to record that. But I'd be very interested in anything that Richard Simpson would like to say about the financial position of the council, and because this has completely changed. I was looking at these papers from the external audit with great interest because it's got about the risk profile. I'm very interested in risk and risk profiles, but the risk profile is now completely different.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Do you have
So Councillor Clifton's described some of those challenges very well in terms of immediate kind of expenditure pressures that we wouldn't have predicted, income falling off a cliff in some regards, and then just we know what's happened already, so that's takes some work to work it out, but we kind of have a kind of 3-month picture. I think the harder bit is the next 9-month picture, both whether there's any re-emergent second wave, etc., but also the impact on the economy, and the economic situation obviously drives costs for the council and reduction in income streams for the council, and kind of how long that goes on. So there's one thing about managing it in the short term, then there's another thing about having a medium-term financial plan over a 3-year period that you can. It's always hard in normal times because quite often the government won't necessarily give you certainty over the medium term in how much funding, although they have done sometimes in the past. But it's even harder, I suppose, given the conditions we face. The government going back to this report and the audit, I suppose the auditors obviously audit our accounts for last year in terms of the accuracy of our accounts, but they also look at kind of value for money and give a value for money judgment, and that's not so much about value for money in the sense of what we bought and did we get that for a good price. It's a little bit more about financial sustainability and our readiness, I suppose, in the environment we're operating in. And as Councillor Clifton said, even in the best run authorities, I think they'll still be having challenges. I saw Leeds in the local government press today, Leeds, which is quite a well thought of local authority, having serious financial problems and potentially an emergency budget in the next month or so. So major financial challenges. The budget set in February when we had no idea particularly of the scale of what was to come. At the moment we've received about 10.5 million in funding from government and expect there to be a gap of circa 5 million this year, with all the caveats I've just talked about how difficult it is to predict some of these things. And just to thank Councillor Clifton for his comments on officers and staff. I share his view about staring at screens, and also the change that staff have had to adapt to, and all people in employment probably have had to adapt to very quickly in a different way of working. Also, I'm sure you've probably seen it in the Chief Exec's messages, but over 300 staff being redeployed into different roles. And Margaret perfectly illustrated it, I think, when she said an internal auditor has been helping out with the community hub. It's an example of quite a skill sets being used in different ways.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, I'd like to reiterate Councillor Christen's comments. I think the staff have made a wonderful job of adapting to an extremely difficult situation and completely new set of demands on what needs to be done by the council, and have done a brilliant job of responding to what people want and how they need it supplied. One problem I do have is that government deals in broad brush and local authority has to handle detail. I assume that there will be some form of reconciliation process at some point during this year to find out where the gaps are. Would that be the case?
Reconciliation makes it sound quite detailed and accurate. I think there will have to be a differential approach. So the way the money's been given out at the moment has been formula based, and everyone will always argue the formula isn't fair, won't they? And it'll suit others more than some. So the 2 tranches of money have been given out on a formula basis. The second tranche was just per head, a flat basis. The first tranche was more in line with the normal way that local government funding is given out in terms of the funding formula. I do think there are obviously some exceptional examples like Luton, who owned an airport, for example. So there's some exceptional examples where we might have to treat people differently, and particularly on income streams is probably where that shows more. It's easier to predict expenditure patterns, particularly in response to the emergency, because they're a little bit more aligned with the size of population and the need of the borough. Not exactly, but it's easier to do that. I think some of the income streams, I'll lead a bit more of a nuanced approach. And there is some talk of kind of income guarantees and the like from government. So they may guarantee up to a certain floor your council tax for the next 2 years, so you can have a bit more confidence about budgeting in the here and now and planning ahead. So that's one possible approach that government may take to that.
Okay, what point do you think we may have a clearer understanding of the gap in funding?
So we plan to take a paper, and me and Vicky are working on a paper to come to Strategy and Resources in September that recasts our medium-term financial plan. So when the budget was set in February, it would have obviously been a balanced budget for the year we're in, and things are moving on in the year we're in, as we've just talked about, but we also had assumptions for the following 2 years. So we're kind of going to represent that. How many variables will still be in that, I don't know, because that depends on government policy announcements around funding, but I don't think we can completely wait for 100% certainty before we start doing our own planning. We're going to have to make some assumptions and start planning ahead. So September will be when we take a view on that, and then have to do some work in advance of when council would set the budget in late February.
Okay, thank you for that. There are no further questions on the report, so can we now move to the recommendations, which is...
Could I just say something?
Councillor Matty, yes?
No, I was just saying that, I mean, the council have been pushed into a very, very difficult situation, and I haven't had any adverse comments at all about how the council have been handling things, and people have been very positive. So that's good. But the biggest problem I foresee is that we've got, it's been identified that many people carry the virus who don't show any symptoms. Because of the sheer numbers that we've had in this country, we could be in for a second wave, and therefore I think we do need to put in the contingency plans. That's one thing, we mustn't just sit back and think, well, it's gone, because it's like a ticking time bomb. And the other thing is that, I'm speaking to people in local banks dealing with local companies. They've been quite gloomy about people's prospects of businesses surviving in the period once all the subsidies and everything have been taken away, and this is going to have a big impact on. I think Mrs. Simpson will correct me, but I think our income from council from business rates is about £60 million a year. Is it that order of magnitude? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, the total business rates is about that, but in the current system, we only keep 30% of that.
Yeah, well, maybe government will be a bit more generous, but the thing is that a lot of businesses, that I've spoken to, I'm not a pessimist, but they've been very circumspect about the next 12 months, so, and that obviously is going to affect the council's finances as well. So, I mean, I think we've got to be very cautious, and it'd be better that the financial forecasts have that written in, that we take a sort of view that, a lot of businesses are going to struggle.
Thank you, Councillor Matty. I think a lot of people are in extremely fraught times at the moment with a lot of uncertainty, and I sympathise with those who have financial or health problems and that need to be dealt with. So I do not leave the house myself at the moment because of health issues, and I'm not sure whether I should or shouldn't, because your second wave view may happen, and that is a problem for the future. Can we move to recommendations, please? To note the progress made by the external auditor and the revised external audit plan for 2019-20. Thank you. We've got general agreement on that. Can we now go back to item 11, please? Mr. Holland, are you there? Can't hear you, unfortunately.
Hello, can you hear now on the?
It's very faint.
Right. I'm using this via the phone link. So it might be a bit of an echo. So on the report, it is from last year's fraud work. I'd like to draw members' attention to table 5.
Sorry, Chair. Can I interrupt here? Could Kevin, if Kevin presses asterisk and number 6 on his phone, it should turn on his phone microphone, and I'll mute his camera. He just presses asterisk and 6.
That's that. Sorry, I've tried that with me. That working?
It seemed to be a bit better for a moment, Kevin.
Can you hear me through the phone?
Yeah, I mean, if you try and have your phone next to your mouth, we should be able to hear you, I think.
Matthew, isn't it best if he comes off the screen and just does it on the phone?
Yeah, it would be better. 1 second, Kevin. Kevin, if you just speak directly into the phone, up to your mouth.
Yeah.
Okay,
can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Okay, so I was going to say, just on the report, I want to just direct members' attention to table 5 on page 107. Just at the first line in and around the tenancy fraud. It is an area that we've been working with the providers in Sutton in recent years. That has shown that in terms of referrals coming through to us, that has increased, and as is back in line with the other authorities. And with that, you can see the table above on table 4. I apologise for the error in the end column, which says it's to the end of January. It is for the full year, but it does show that the number of project recovers has gone up in that last year. The other bit I would like to point out to members is, if you look at table 6, and it gives a list of savings, it may look slightly out of kilter between the last year and this year for work on council tax. There is a reason for this, is that there was a particular piece of work with external data matching taking place in 17-18 and 18-19. that work was ceased because of the potential of the London Counter Fraud Hub, but that did not happen. But that didn't mean that the work in that area ceased. We did have the NFI output, and the colleagues in the working with the Sutton's revenues team is why the savings were identified, or should we say the fraud against the public purse was identified, and that's identified in the line below for a 1920. The other thing I would say is that that's been a reasonably good year, successful year for us working in Sutton. I noted comments earlier on about how the COVID-19 is affecting this current year and how colleagues are adapting. That has affected the fraud partnership as well. And quite a few of my team across the partnership, we've been involved in the business rate grant payments and reviews on the discretionary payment process that is now happening. Understanding the council has asked about where their risk assessment's been undertaken. Yes, there have been. We've worked with colleagues and worked with the business rate managers, both in the upfront processing for collation of information and details from businesses to make sure that we are getting valid businesses who are eligible for funds. And we are also in the middle of doing some post-payment checks on those using external data matching facilities and services. And we are in the midst of going through those at the moment. I'll take any questions on the report.
Thank you for that. Any questions of councillors, please? No? Councillor Weatherlake.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, thank you for including the explanation about the dramatic changes in the numbers year on year. That's very helpful. There's a mention of the London Counter Fraud Hub. Do we have any update on that?
From my side, it's gone completely silent at the moment. So there was work on that at the beginning of the year, where there was an alternative proposal being put forward, but that's gone completely silent since lockdown.
Okay, thank you.
Any follow-up questions?
No.
Any further questions from the committee, please? Right, there's no further questions. So can we then move to the recommendations on this one, which is to note and comment on the report? Agreed?
Question.
Question? Okay, Councillor Nanda, yes?
So looking on the page 108 and the fraud things, can you explain on to the employees school admissions 2019-20 12,000 and 18-19 6,000 and 17-18 24,000? So can you go through that little bit brief for me, please? I didn't get it.
Right. So each year in around the admissions, I think all of those relate to primary school admissions. So around the time when applications are being processed, we will contact the various school admissions teams, and where they believe they've received an application where the parent or guardian is providing false details of residency, they'll come our way. And where we prove that the application is false and the place is declined, that's where we will claim, and it is, all these are notional savings, I'm afraid, but it will claim that notional saving. So across those years, there were two cases that were turned down in 1920 of the ones looked at, one the previous year and 4 going back in 17-18. I think because the admissions team helped put out there that if you are submitting false data to obtain a place that you're not entitled to, the checks will be carried out. I think that's why the numbers are quite low, but it is based on referrals we get through from Sutton School Admissions team.
Thank you. I just also want to make on the record, I just welcome your point on 6.1, where majority of the staffs now they are referring to the fraud thing. So they are being more aware and proactive to investigate all these things. That's why the numbers are going down. So which is the welcome move. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Councillor Weatherlake, did you have a follow-up question? Sorry.
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Can we agree the recommendations then, please? Now, I think, Councillor Weatherlake, I hand back to you because we have one last item, which is the work programme.
Yes. Yes. Do members have any comments on the work programme? Okay. In that case, I think we can consider that one approved.
Yeah.
And there's no urgent business that I'm aware of, so we will close the meeting at 21:20, and the committee will next meet on Thursday, the 24th of September. If any members have any particularly pressing questions regarding tonight's meeting, I'm sure the officers would be happy to answer them. But if any members or officers need to dash away, please do so, and we can ensure questions are answered.